Lawns are an almost universal feature in our landscape. The professional maintenance of turf is a large and important part of the green industry. The popularity of turf grass is well-deserved. Aesthetically, little can compare to the broad expanse of a well-maintained turf. And functionally, few other plants can withstand the variety of uses to which turf grass is often subjected. There are many different plants that can be used as ground covers, but turf grass is the most common choice because it is one of the few plants which can be mowed continually. Repeated mowing of turf gives it a uniform texture and appearance. The reason we can repeatedly mow turf grass is that the plant's crown, the growing point, is near the ground at the base of the leaf sheath. Though as much as 1/3 of the plant's leaf surface may be cut off, as long as the crown is undamaged, the plant is usually able to grow back time and time again. Lawns are a dominant part of landscapes throughout the country. The goal of professional turf management is the maintenance of uniform, functional turf throughout the growing season. In most parts of the country, it's impossible to maintain attractive lawns without an ongoing maintenance program. The level of care required will vary with the turf's use, its desired appearance, the turf grass species used, and the climatic conditions in which it's growing. Though the particulars of lawn maintenance vary in different parts of the country, the general principles of lawn care are similar regardless of where the turf is grown. In this videotape, we are presenting an overview of professional turf management. We'll look at the types of turf grasses, mowing, irrigation, fertilization, some cultural practices, and weed, insect, and disease control. It is impossible to develop or continue a turf maintenance program without a thorough understanding of the site. A comprehensive site assessment helps the turf manager develop a sound and balanced maintenance program. If possible, begin the assessment by evaluating the maintenance programs used on the site in the past. Take a soil profile. This will provide an opportunity to study the soil environment and the condition of the turf grass plants. A soil test is also an important component of the assessment. A soil testing service can give you a full report of fertility and pH levels. Next, identify the turf grasses in the area. Often the site has a mixture of several different turf grasses. Determine what your own resources are for maintaining the site, what equipment, labor, water, and supplies you're able to expend. And finally, determine the uses and special needs of the site. After your site analysis, develop a detailed maintenance plan which addresses the specific maintenance issues and problems you've discovered. Let's look at these major management practices in detail. There are many turf grass species and cultivars. There are about a dozen different types of turf grasses in these test plots. To the untrained eye, all turf grass may look the same, but with careful study and observation, you can learn to identify the more common turf grass species in use today. Turf grasses are broadly divided into cool season grasses and warm season grasses. Generally speaking, cool season grasses grow best in the northern parts of the country. These turf grasses tend to grow best with temperatures between 60 and 80 degrees. At temperatures above or below this, growth is slowed or even halted. Turf grasses such as bluegrasses, the bent grasses, perennial ryegrass, and the tall and fine fescues are common cool season grasses. Cool season grasses are sometimes planted as sod. This method of establishing turf provides an instant attractive cover. It's also possible to start a cool season turf using seed. Often several different species or cultivars of seed are used to satisfy certain cultural needs such as improved disease resistance or more rugged wear. A common seed formulation consists of a mix of Kentucky bluegrass, perennial rye, and fine fescue. Warm season turf grasses thrive in the heat of the south and southwest. They grow best when temperatures are between 80 and 95 degrees. Bermuda is the most common warm season turf grass. Other examples are zoysia, centipede, and St. Augustine. Usually, when establishing a warm season lawn, a single type of grass is used. They're often started vegetatively, as in this Bermuda sod. Between these two major turf grass zones is the transition zone. In this area, both warm and cool season grasses may grow. Warm season grasses dominate in the hot summer months, and cool season grasses dominate during the cooler months. Mowing is usually the most time-consuming aspect of lawn care. Understanding the basics of turf grass growth and using the appropriate equipment will result in an efficient and effective mowing program. There are two important principles of turf growth which relate to mowing. The first is, as the height of the cut is decreased, the required frequency of cutting is increased. For instance, a putting green may be mowed at 3/16 of an inch. In order to properly maintain this height, it has to be cut 4 to 6 times a week. On the other hand, a home lawn, which may be maintained at a 2-inch height, may only have to be mowed once a week. The second principle related to mowing is a turf cut more frequently will exhibit greater density than the same turf grass mowed less frequently. This turf is mowed several times a week and has a thick, dense stand. In contrast, this one is mowed less frequently and has less density. The key to proper mowing is cutting the turf grass at the correct height. Ideally, no more than 1/3 of the grass plant should be cut off at any one time. The optimal cutting height varies with each type of turf grass plant. The preferred cutting height of creeping bent grass is between 2/10 and 1/2 of an inch. Bermuda grass is best cut between 1/2 and 1 inch. The preferred cutting height of red fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and perennial ryegrass is 1 to 2 inches, and tall fescue is best cut between 1.5 and 3 inches. To obtain the best possible cut, it's a good idea to mow in alternate patterns. This will encourage good vertical growth and prevent a condition called grain, which is the tendency for turf grass to grow in a horizontal direction. Grass clippings may have to be removed in certain circumstances, for instance on golf greens, but remember that fertility applications will have to be increased to compensate for the removal of clippings. In many cases, clippings can be left on the ground to decompose. Because they contribute to nutrient levels, leaving them on the ground will actually reduce fertilization costs. There are 3 general types of mowers: reel, rotary, and flail. Rotary mowers have the advantage of being able to cut through coarse grasses. They're appropriate for turf maintained at a height greater than 1 inch. Reel mowers range from small push-type mowers to larger hydraulically powered types. Reel-type mowers provide a cleaner cut and are preferred for finer turf areas. They're the best type of mower for turf areas maintained at a height of cut less than 1 inch. Reel mowers are also available in a wide variety of sizes. Flail mowers are used for rough cutting of coarse vegetation. Regardless of the type of mower, always follow proper safety and maintenance practices. The goal of any irrigation program for turf grass is to encourage the development of deep-rooted turf grass plants. Remember this basic principle. The development of deeply rooted plants is encouraged by deep water penetration. The frequency and amount of water needed will depend on the soil structure, climate and weather conditions, turf type, and maintenance practices. The given soil structure plays a major role in directing any irrigation program. Heavy clay soils are slow to soak up water and are slow to dry out. It's important to water these soils slowly to allow for deep penetration. Sandy soils have a limited water holding capacity. However, because roots grow as deeply as the water penetrates, properly irrigated turf grass in a sandy soil develops deep roots. Again, deep, infrequent watering is best. There's some argument about when the best time of day is for watering. Generally, early morning is the preferred time of day to water. Studies have shown that early evening irrigation often induces disease development. It's a good idea to avoid heavy irrigation during sunny, hot, and windy weather. In some areas, water pressure is low in the afternoon and may reduce irrigation efficiency. Because weather and soils vary, the best method of determining irrigation schedules is to observe and test each turf area. You can check the irrigation system's distribution of water by setting out cans at even intervals and measuring the amount of water that falls in each can. Ideally, all the cans should have about the same water depth. Adjust the irrigation system if distribution is uneven. Poor water distribution may be the result of improper pipe size, poor water pressure, or incorrect spacing or adjustment of irrigation heads. It's possible to test for water levels in the soil. Use a moisture tester called a tensiometer, or take a core sample to determine when the soil's water reservoir is depleted. If the turf has just taken on a wilting condition, that is, a bluish cast, curling of leaves, and loss of resiliency after walking on it, it is time to water. Ideally, you should water just before the turf is in this stress condition. During periods of high temperature as well as high winds, the technique of midday syringing is used. By lightly misting the turf grass area, the leaf temperature of the turf grass blade is lowered and transpiration is reduced. This technique may help reduce late afternoon stress and prevent severe wilting. The most important principle related to turf irrigation is to water deeply only when needed. A proper irrigation program contributes to the development of a strong root system. "16 nutrients have been identified as essential for plant growth. We generally focus on the 3 macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus in the form of P2O5, and potassium in the form of K2O. Nitrogen is the most important nutrient for leaf growth. Higher nitrogen levels promote leaf formation and deep green color. Nitrogen carriers can be divided into 2 broad groups: soluble and insoluble. Soluble nitrogen is water-soluble and can be utilized by the plant immediately. Though it is instantly available to the plant, it is depleted quickly. Some forms of soluble nitrogen may burn the plant if they're not watered in well. Insoluble nitrogen is not water-soluble, therefore it's released more slowly over a longer period of time. Knowing the form of nitrogen will help you manage the growth response of the turf. For instance, if you need a quick green-up of the turf area, you would choose a soluble form of nitrogen so that the nutrient is immediately available to the plant. But if you have a situation where you're able to fertilize infrequently, say only a couple of times within a season, you would choose an insoluble form of nitrogen which is available to the plant over a longer period of time. And if you have an area in which you want both a quick green-up and a longer interval between fertilization, you would use a mix of soluble and insoluble nitrogen. Though fertilizer application rates vary according to climate, soil, and use of the area, an understanding of the recommended nitrogen requirements of the different turfgrass species will give us some direction in developing our fertilization program. For optimal growth, red fescue should receive between 0.2 and 0.6 pounds of nitrogen per growing month per 1,000 square feet. The rate for tall fescue and perennial ryegrass is 0.4 to 1 pound of nitrogen. Kentucky bluegrass, creeping bentgrass, and Bermuda grass should receive between 1/2 and 1 1/2 pounds of nitrogen. The two other macronutrients which are usually part of a fertilization program are phosphorus and potassium. Phosphorus, in the form of P2O5, promotes strong root growth. It is stable in the soil and needed in smaller amounts. Potassium, in the form of K2O, promotes hardiness and disease resistance. A common recommendation for the ratio of these three nutrients on established turf is a 3 to 1 to 2 combination. One example of a fertilizer with this ratio is one with a formulation of 18-6-12. This means that there is 18% available nitrogen, 6% available phosphorus, and 12% available potassium. During loading and application, avoid contact with fertilizer. It may irritate the skin, and the dust may irritate the lungs. Wear gloves and a dust mask when handling the material. In many cases, it's a good idea to check with your local extension agent for their advice and recommendations on fertilization programs for your area. There are three basic types of equipment that are used for fertilizer application: rotary, drop spreader, and liquid spray. Regardless of the method used to distribute the material, be sure you calibrate the spreader so that there is an even application at the proper rate. Any discussion of fertilization has to address the issue of soil pH. pH is a measurement of acidity or alkalinity. The availability of certain nutrients varies at given pH levels. For instance, iron tends to be less available in alkaline soils, those with a pH over 7. Most turf grasses are adapted to soils that are slightly acidic. A pH of 6 to 6.5 is generally preferred. Within each turf grass type, there is some variation in the optimum pH levels. For instance, the optimum pH for Kentucky bluegrass is between 7 and 6, while a pH of 6.5 to 5.5 is optimum for bentgrass. The pH of an acidic soil can be raised with applications of lime. Sulfur products are used to lower the pH of alkaline soils. pH levels affect more than just nutrient availability. They also affect the rate of microbial activity in the soil. These microbes are important because they help break down accumulated dead organic material. A pH of 6.0 is optimal for the breakdown of this layer of material we call thatch. We define thatch as that organic layer of shoots, stems, and roots that develop between the green vegetation and the soil surface. A thin layer of thatch may be beneficial and act as a buffer for soil temperature, but too thick a layer may act as a water repellent and harbor insects and diseases. Dethatching by mechanical means involves cutting into the turf and lifting the thatch layer to the surface where it can be gathered and removed. Dethatch just before the lawn's most vigorous growth of the season. Ideally, the soil should be moist but not wet. The most common equipment used for dethatching is either a tractor-driven model or one that is self-propelled. It is also possible to reduce thatch with cultural methods. One common cultural method is called top dressing. Here, a thin layer of prepared soil is applied to the surface. The addition of this material, coupled with the proper pH, may encourage microbial activity, which will help break down the thatch layer. Coring is another maintenance practice which contributes to healthy turf grass growth. Coring removes plugs of soil from the turf. After the plugs are pulled, they may be redistributed over the surface. In some cases, the plugs are removed and the holes filled with a soil mix or straight sand. The addition of this amendment may help keep the channels open for a longer period of time. Coring promotes nutrient and air penetration to the plant's roots. It may also help reduce thatch by providing a top dressing of soil, which encourages that microbial activity we discussed earlier. Coring is also effective in reducing soil compaction. There are two general types of coring machines. Piston types are useful when removing closely spaced plugs. Drum types are often used for larger areas. This process should be repeated yearly for turf which receives a moderate amount of traffic, more frequently in high-use areas. There are two general groups of turf weeds. Broadleaf weeds are also referred to as dicots, and the grass weeds are referred to as monocots. The best type of weed control is cultural. If the turf is healthy, it is more likely that weeds will be crowded out. If chemical controls are needed, it is important to know the life cycle of the weed, what chemical to use, and when to apply it. Remember that herbicides must be handled with extreme care. Always read and follow the label's direction. Wear the necessary protective clothing and clearly post notice that a chemical application has been made. If broadleaf weeds are a problem, they can be selectively controlled in most turf grasses using a post-emergence herbicide. These are applied in a liquid or granular form and are absorbed by the leaves. They work best when weeds are young and actively growing. When weed grasses are a problem, they may also be controlled with a post-emergence herbicide. It may also be possible to control weed grasses with a type of herbicide called a pre-emergent. These materials kill the seed as it germinates. The time of application is very important for these products. If there are signs of turf damage, accurate diagnosis is crucial. Inspect the grass blades. Check under the sod. Dig into the soil. If you're not able to diagnose the problem yourself, take a sample of the insect or disease population, or at least evidence of the damage, to your local extension agent. They are usually able to diagnose the problem and suggest possible treatments. If you have to treat the turf for insect control, select the proper insecticide, use professional safety equipment, and apply the chemical at the proper time and rate. Turf insects are divided into two broad categories: root feeders and surface feeders. The most common group of root feeders are grubs. Common leaf feeders are sod webworm and chinch bugs. Some examples of turf diseases are leaf spot, fusarium patch, and dollar spot, to name just a few. Various fungicides may be used to control turf diseases. In addition, the adjustment of cultural practices may be necessary. This includes selection of disease-resistant turf, proper irrigation, and optimal levels of fertilization. Professional lawn care is a demanding discipline. Successful turf management requires a scientific understanding of turfgrass as well as practical experience in the field. In this videotape, we've touched on many aspects of professional lawn care. We looked at the site assessment, at the major turfgrass types, and at some of the principles and practices involved in a good mowing program. We also examined water and irrigation as it relates to turfgrass growth. We discussed soil fertility and saw some of the methods of fertilizer application. We also saw the value of dethatching and coring. And we concluded with a broad overview of weed, insect, and disease problems in turf. Professional turf managers are in demand throughout the country. Individuals who have mastered the basics of turf grass growth and who are able to apply this knowledge in the field are needed in many different settings throughout the green industry.